In the shadows where the veil thins, truth whispers, unseen forces stir, and the unknown calls your name. Here, in the depths of the metaphysical, the darkness is not to be feared, it is to be understood. But beyond the night, there is also light. For every shadow there is a glow, for every question an answer waiting to be found. We walk the line between mystery and revelation, between fear and enlightenment. Welcome to Lumino and Umbra, where we embrace both the seen and the unseen, the dark and the divine. Occult, your guide on this journey beyond the veil. Together, you will discover the secrets of the metaphysical world, step by step, shadow by light. Now, here is your host, Occult.
Welcome, everyone. Today is the day that finally we are going to be talking about the spiritual stuff, and it is actually based on the Egregore architecture. Do we build our own gods? And in the comments, I see some people are asking for the readings, so I would like to say that today is not the reading day. Thursday, I will be doing the readings. So if you guys would like to turn the notifications on for the Thursday, which you guys can find the upcoming live reading link under the live section on my channel, you guys can go there and turn the notifications on so you guys can actually get the readings on that day. Hello, Ansuman, how are you doing? I'm doing pretty good. Finally, my nose is not leaking, but it is still kind of little bit stuffy, so I'm working on it, but I'm feeling much better. Thank you so much for asking. Thank you so much for you all being in here. I really appreciate it. So today we are going to be talking about some really deep spiritual stuff. Hopefully I am actually thinking to do this as like 2 parts or maybe 3 parts. I think it's going to be 3 parts is because it is going to be a long subject. Hello, Sasha. I'm doing pretty good. How about you? How are you doing? Last week I was sick. I got cold, and the last winter storm that we got slammed down while we were actually shoveling the snow outside, I got the cold like that. I got sweat and I took my coat off, and of course it was cold outside and I got the cold like that. So I'm feeling much better, and I'm glad that you're doing okay too. Awesome. That's so good to see you guys in here. Thank you so much for you guys being in here. So yeah, for the readings, you guys can turn the notifications on for the upcoming reading, which I already have shared the link down under the live section on my channel. You guys can see that, so don't forget that. Thank you so much, Ansuman. Love and light to you too. I actually take the multivitamin, Sasha, so yes, I am getting my vitamins and everything, and finally I actually started getting much better. Getting stronger in here. Yay. It's gonna get better. But yeah, so today is the podcast day. We are gonna be talking about the stuff. If you guys are interested in, you guys can listen this anytime, which I am recording it and sharing it on my YouTube channel, and anytime you guys can come back and listen this. It's pretty interesting subject, and I have actually made the poll on my YouTube, posted the poll, and based on that poll, it is actually this subject came out more than the others. So it's a pretty unique and interesting subject. So yes, you have a spiritual question, but you don't know how you should frame it, Sasha. Let's see. It has to do with energies. Give it a try. You can. before I start the subject, so you guys can ask that if you guys have any questions like that. And then after that, I would like to start talking about this subject. It's pretty interesting, guys, like really. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about the egregore terminology before, but when I was making the research about this, it actually really fascinated me. And for like the nowadays occults and let's say like when you look in the back in the ancient Sumerian and ancient Egyptian times, you can actually see that how they created and made the creatures or people turn into the gods, like how they actually created it. And also we are going to be talking about some other interesting stuff as well. Kitty, don't do it. So yes, my lovely cat came here. Come on. Well, come here if you want to. Come here. Ah, here is Cookie. I love you. So yes, if you guys have any questions like that, I am actually suggesting you guys to ask me right now. If not, then I will start talking about the subject. All right, so welcome everyone. Tonight we step into a space where thought becomes form, where belief gathers weight, and where the unseen may be far more alive than we imagine. There's a word, strange, ancient, and quietly powerful, egregore. An egregore is not a creature in a traditional sense, nor a spirit bound to a single mind. It is something born between minds, a presence shaped collectively, fed by attention, emotion, ritual, and repetition. Whenever a group of people focus on the same symbol, the same idea, the same story, something begins to coalesce. Not metaphorically, but experientially, a shared psychic construct that can influence those who created it. Think of it as a thought form with gravity. Closely related is the concept of the tulpa, an entity intentionally created within the mind through intense concentration and visualization. While a tulpa is often personal, an egregore is communal. A tulpa belongs to one consciousness. An egregore belongs to many. And sometimes it begins to act as if it belongs to itself. From a psychological perspective, this idea may feel less supernatural and more familiar. Collective beliefs shape behavior. Symbols influence identity. Narratives guide perception. The egregore, in this sense, becomes a living metaphor for the power of shared imagination. How culture, ideology, and group identity can take on a life of their own. Carl Jung might have called this movement of energy and expression of the collective unconscious, where archetypes rise repeat, and manifest across individuals without direct communication. In a Jungian lens, an egregore could be seen as an archetype given focus, fed by attention, and stabilized through ritual and belief. It is psyche externalized, or perhaps the illusion of externalization, revealing something deeper within. But beyond psychology lies the occult and esoteric tradition, where egregores are not just metaphors, they are treated as real, autonomous forces. Secret societies, mystical orders, and ancient brotherhoods have long believed that their rituals do more than symbolize unity. They generate presence. Each symbol repeated, each oath spoken, each ceremony performed adds fuel to a shared entity that watches, guides, and sometimes demands. In these traditions, an egregore can protect, but it can also control. It can inspire brilliance or demand conformity. It can unify a group with purpose or consume it with obsession. And here is where things become unsettlingly modern. Because today we are creating egregores at an unprecedented scale. Internet memes, those seemingly harmless fragments of humor and symbolism, spread rapidly, mutate, and embed themselves into millions of minds. They carry emotion, identity, inside jokes, and collective recognition. The more they are shared, the stronger they become. The stranger part, some begin to feel alive, persistent, evolving, almost aware of their own existence within culture. What are they, if not digital egregores? And if that is true, then what about something older? What about ancient gods, religions, mythologies that have been fed for centuries through prayer, ritual, devotion, fear, and love? Are they divine realities, or are they humanity's most enduring egregores? Perhaps the answer is not the one or the other. Something in between. Because the line between imagination and reality is not as solid as we like to believe. Egregores live on that line. They are born in light, in unity, creativity, shared meaning. But they also cast shadows in control, dogma, and unconscious influence. They reflect us, they amplify us, and sometimes they outgrow us. So tonight, as we begin, consider this. What ideas are you feeding? What symbols are shaping you? And what unseen presences might already be listening, formed from the thoughts you thought were yours alone? So before we step into the unseen together, I would like to give you guys the disclaimer really quick. I want to be clear about a few things. The information shared in this podcast is based on a variety of sources, both verified and unverified, and is presented for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is absolutely not my intention to influence your spiritual journey or change your personal beliefs in any way. Your spiritual journey and the conclusions you draw are entirely your own, and you have the sole right to your own judgment and discernment on these topics. Please be aware that I cannot be held responsible for any personal interpretations or comments you may have regarding the subjects discussed. This podcast and any accompanying videos are intended solely for an adult audience of 18 years or older. If you're under the age of 18, please exit this podcast or video now. Thank you for your understanding and for respecting this disclaimer. Now, let's begin. Let's do this. Now, let's talk about what's the meaning of egregore in spiritual aspect. In the spiritual or esoteric context, an egregore is a collective thought form or a group consciousness that is created and sustained by the shared beliefs, emotions, and intentions of a group of people. The word comes from the Greek egregore, which I will add this. You guys can see it better. Right here. Its meaning is watchers. In modern spiritual traditions, an egregore is understood as a non-physical entity or energetic presence, formed through repeated collective focus, sustained by shared intention or belief, capable of influencing the thoughts or behavior of those connected to it. Let's see how it works, spiritually speaking, actually. In esoteric traditions and teachings associated with, the idea appears in different forms. The concept later became popular in modern occultism and ceremonial magic. So the basic idea is a group repeatedly focuses on a symbol, deity, idea, or purpose. Over time, that focus generates a subtle energetic form. The egregore develops a kind of semi-autonomous presence. It can then influence members by reinforcing the group's that shared beliefs or behaviors. So examples in spiritual context, we can say it as like a religious congregation creating a shared spiritual presence through prayer. A secret society or a magical order building a protective group spirit. There are certain things, actually, we can talk about the egregores. The egregore, not usually considered a literal physical being, it exists on a mental, psychic, or subtle energetic level. Strength grows with attention and belief, and weakens when attention fades. The attention is actually really the most important thing that it becomes about the egregores, which we are going to be talking about it eventually. You guys will see everything what I meant. But in the modern interpretation, in contemporary spirituality and psychology, an egregore can be viewed metaphorically as a powerful group mindset, a shared psychological field, and collective archetypal energy, which this is similar to ideas explored by in the concept of collective unconscious. But we would like to put a little PS in here. The concept of egregore belongs to esoteric belief system, not mainstream science. Its interpretation varies depending on spiritual tradition, and some see it as symbolic rather than literal. If you'd like, we can actually talk about the differences. So when we are talking about egregores, earlier, as I have mentioned, the tulpas are coming, okay? So the egregore is actually something different than tulpa. But for now, we are going to be focusing on the egregore first of all. And what exact meaning of egregore in the book of Enoch, that's what I have looked for, is because book of Enoch, if we are talking about the watchers, book of Enoch is something that we should be talking about it, about the egregores as well. Because the watchers, the idea of watchers is coming from the book of Enoch, which I had talked about it in the Angels and Demons podcast that I have done before. And the word often translated as egregore refers to a specific group of angels called the watchers. I don't know if I have put that in here. No. Okay. The exact meaning in the book of Enoch is exactly coming from that Greek word egregore. I think I am saying it right, but I'm not so sure. The watchers, or those who are awake, okay? So in a text, these watchers are angels assigned to observe humanity, sent to earth under divine authority, led by figures such as angels, and they later rebelled by descending to earth, taking human wives and teaching forbidden knowledge to humans. Which I have talked about this in my Angels and Demons podcasts, and you guys can check those ones out as well. So let's remember actually what they did, what the watchers did. So they mated with human women. Their offspring were the Nephilim, which are the giants. They taught humans secret arts like warfare, sorcery, astrology, and metalworking. Their actions corrupted humanity eventually, and because of this, they were punished by God and bound until the final judgment. But in the book of Enoch, egregore does not mean a thought form or collective psychic entity that only appears in the modern occult, meaning developed much later, okay? In Enoch, specifically, it simply means a class of angelic beings known as the Watchers. So let's explain how the meaning actually evolved from Watchers in ancient Jewish texts to the modern occult idea of a collective spiritual entity. So, first of all, the ancient meaning that we have talked about it, like the literal angelic beings, but this was the 3rd and 1st century before Christ. And then after the word egregore, which is the Watchers, referred to specific angels assigned to observe humanity who later rebelled and fell, and they were described as real supernatural beings, not symbolic thought forms. And then this concept also appears in the where Watchers are heavenly beings delivering divine judgments. So at this stage, egregore equals to a type of angel at that time. This is the ancient meaning of the egregore. Nothing psychological or collective about it yet. And when we say specific angels, we can talk about archangels, like Archangel Michael, Archangel Raphael, Archangel Gabriel, and these are all actually representing the certain symbolic things. For example, Archangel Michael represents the symbolic form of warrior angel, sword of light, defender against evil, protector, or related with the protection also. Archangel Raphael represents the symbolic form of healing and guidance. And Archangel Gabriel becomes an egregore of communication, prophecy, and revelation as messenger intelligence or archetype. So this interpretation is not the traditional view in Abrahamic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In those traditions, angels are real beings created by God, not products of human thought. As Jewish mysticism developed, we can say early Merkava and later Kabbalistic traditions, angelic hierarchies became more symbolic and metaphysical. So angels increasingly represented cosmic forces, divine attributes, spiritual intelligences, governing realms. But the idea of spiritual beings connected to collective forces slowly expanded, but still not yet a group mind. In the 1800s, Western occult revival movements began reworking older texts. Groups like the, let's say, Freemasons or Rosicrucians that drew from Enochian magic, Kabbalah, or Renaissance grimoires, Hermetic philosophy, and with all the mix of these, of course, the shift started beginning. And the occultists started thinking of spiritual entities as energetic constructs sustained by ritual and intention, influenced by group consciousness. And so the term egregore was reintroduced but its meaning subtly expanded. In early 20th century, it actually is turned into the collective psychic force. So the French occultists who popularized many esoteric reinterpretations of angelology influenced later thinkers who treated spiritual beings less as literal angels and more as psychic or astral forces. By the 1900s, an egregore became understood as a group-created astral entity formed by shared belief, ritual, and intention. So instead of angels descending to earth, now it's actually turned into the groups create energetic forms. And those influence the group in return, and that entity becomes semi-autonomous. So the watcher idea evolved into something that watches over and shapes a group from within its shared consciousness. Modern occult and psychological interpretation is actually a little related, and also there are some differences. So in modern esotericism and chaos magic, an egregore is often defined as a collective thought form, a psychic field generated by shared focus, a group spirit sustained by belief. Psychological parallels are sometimes drawn to ideas like the collective unconscious proposed by Carl Jung himself, like, did not use the term of egregore, but actually now, if I put it like this, you guys can see it. The era, and as you guys can see, the ancient Jewish texts, they were totally different. And early mysticism, as we have talked, and it was totally different. And of course, the 19th and 20th centuries and modern usage, all totally different. So yeah, I'm wondering what you guys are actually thinking about it until like this part. What are you guys' thoughts actually? It's really interesting to me though. And also, there's another thing. I was wondering why this shift had happened, because there are actually three main reasons that I came across with. So the first reason is the symbolic reinterpretation. Angels became metaphors for energies. And then the second reason is the rise of psychological thinking. So the spiritual forces reframed as mental and astral phenomena. And the third reason is the occult experimentation. So the groups noticed shared rituals seemed to generate persistent presences. So the words stayed the same, but the ontology changed from external divine beings to internally generated collective forces. It's really interesting though. And eventually I will be talking about the psychological part of it, which is even more interesting. And if you guys are interested about the psychological part of these, it's like really eye-catching part. So, as I have talked about it in the beginning of this podcast, I have said something about tulpas. What are tulpas? So, what are thought forms, aka tulpas? So, the thought forms, often called tulpas, are believed in certain spiritual and esoteric traditions to be entities or presences created through focused thought, visualization, and intention. So the main idea is sustained mental focus can generate a semi-independent mental or spiritual construct. And I actually made a research about the tulpa. So the original meaning of tulpa is actually coming from Tibetan Buddhism, specifically the concept of sprolpa, which is often translated as emanation or manifestation. So when it says manifestation, it is actually making me think also as like, well, you know, when you actually think about your own wishes and dreams and goals, can you create the same way? Think about that. Because actually that way you are creating your own egregore, and your egregore actually is becoming your own reality. That's something different, but it's interesting. There's a relation for it as well. So this idea, the tulpa, this idea became widely known in the West through writings like Magic and Mystery in Tibet by Alexandra David Niels. So she described advanced Tibetan practitioners creating visualized beings that could appear vividly real, even seemingly to act independently. But also, I would like to say that traditional Tibetan teachings do not describe tulpas the same way modern internet culture does. The Western occult interpretation is partly based on David Neal's interpretation, so that's another thing. But so the Tibetans have some sort of like teaching like this, but it is actually adapted to this idea. So the theosophy and the thought forms is actually getting interesting in the Western esotericism. Okay, so in Western esotericism, especially in theosophical society, I couldn't speak, theosophical society teachings, thought forms were described as mental, emotional energy constructs, and they are created by repeated thinking and emotional charge, and they are existing on the astral plane. The book Thought Forms systemized this idea, claiming thoughts have shape, color, and energetic structure. Thoughts are not just private mental events, they are energetic forms. So that's where this coming from. The idea is becoming this eventually. So the modern occult definition is also something. In contemporary occultism, a tulpa is usually described as a deliberately created mental entity. and it's built through visualization, dialogue, and sustained attention. And it is developing parent autonomy over time. And some practitioners are claiming that tulpa can communicate and it has its own personality. It feels separate from the creator also. But some of the others are interpreting them as a structured part of the subconscious mind and a dissociated or compartmentalized mental process. So yeah, it's really interesting though. There are the differences between tulpa and egregores also. Well, let's talk about the psychological interpretation of tulpa. From a psychological viewpoint, thought forms can be understood as personified aspects of the subconscious. Active imagination, which this is similar to techniques explored by Carl Jung. And also, tulpa is complex internal narratives gaining stability through repetition. So the modern tulpamancy communities often describe the process in cognitive rather oops, I have lost it. All right, okay, yeah. Rather than mystical terms. So it's more like the psychological thing. So here we come to the difference between the egregore and tulpa. So the tulpa is created by one person and egregore is actually created by a group. That's the group consciousness and the one person's consciousness. And the tulpa is individual mental construct, and egregore is actually appearing as collective psychic construct. So there's a difference like that. And the tulpa is often personal and private, but egregore is tied to shared belief or organization. As we can say, tulpa equals to the individual thought form, and egregore equals to the group thought form. And there is also no scientific evidence that thought forms exist as independent external beings. Experiences described by practitioners can often be explained through psychology, imagination, dissociation, or cognitive reinforcement. However, within spiritual and occult frameworks, they are treated as real subtle entities. Psychologists generally approach egregores and tulpas as psychological or social phenomena, not as independent supernatural entities. Psychologists generally approach egregores and tulpas like psychological or social phenomena, but these interpretations vary by subfield, like for example, clinical psychology, cognitive psychology, social psychology, etc. But there are some common perspectives about this. tulpa interpreted through cognitive and dissociative process. According to psychology, a tulpa is often described by practitioners as a thought form that becomes an autonomous personality in mind. Psychologists tend to interpret this through known mental mechanisms. So dissociation and subpersonalities are actually becoming the part of this idea. Many psychologists compare tulpas to distinct self-states within a single mind. This also relates to ideas studied in DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. But tulpas are not usually pathological like DID. That's another note that I would like to put it. There's a difference. The concept of ego states used in psychotherapy. So in this view, the mind can simulate another agent with its own voice and perspective. So it's actually the imagination and metacognition. Okay. There are stuff that I have found. Eventually we will be talking about it, but it's really interesting though. So research on inner speech, which is something that I will be talking about it a little detailed way. Inner speech and theory of mind shows humans are very good at modeling other minds. A tulpa may arise when someone repeatedly imagines another mind until the brain begins to treat it like a separate agent. So we're going to be talking about the predictive brain models. Some cognitive scientists connect the phenomenon to predictive processing, which, if I'm not wrong, right here. The brain predicts experiences so strongly that imagined agents can feel internally generated. And there's a point about this that I would like to say. Psychologists also usually view tulpas as self-generated mental constructs that can feel autonomous rather than external spirits. So there is the spiritual aspect of it, and there is a psychological aspect of this egregore subject, and it is actually very interesting. So what do you guys think? Is it like something that we humans are creating in our minds out of the blue, and we are actually giving attention, emotion, and energy to it to make it exist? Or it is something actually spiritual and it exists in the astral level as a supernatural being? It's very interesting because at the end, like, it's kind of in a way mind-fucking subject. And if you guys actually can make it to the end of this subject, on the upcoming episodes, then you guys will understand what I'm talking about. It is really mind fucking, honestly. Then you guys will understand what I'm talking about. It like, it's like you guys are gonna be thinking like, so is it really psychology? Is it really mental and psychological thing, or it is really existing? It's interesting. So psychologically, also, the based on the predictive brain models and all that, the egregore is interpreted as group psychology. An egregore is believed in occult traditions to be a collective entity created by shared belief and attention. Psychology explains similar effects through group dynamics. So the collective belief systems are actually coming into some important thing. And in psychology, shared beliefs can shape behavior and perception. Concepts related to this, including like the collective consciousness, groupthink, and social identity theory. A group may behave as if a shared entity exists because their beliefs coordinate their actions. Excuse me. So there is also the internet version of it that I have actually talked in the beginning of it. If you guys remember, memes and other stuff. So for the memetics and cultural evolution part, some scholars also connect egregores to the idea of meme, which this popularized by Richard Dawkins. Sorry, this is the inner voice, and this, sorry, I didn't actually put these out. So the inner voice, as you guys can see, the thought idea becomes the language planning, which is the Broca's area, and then after that it goes into the internal articulation, the silent speech. That's how we are creating the egregores and the tulpas. So this is the inner voice. This is for the tulpa, auditory stimulation, and then it goes to the inner speech, which is turned into the internal monologue. This is how we are doing. Like when you guys actually go to bed, you guys cannot sleep because sometimes you guys are having conversations with your 2 or 3 other selves and thinking that, well, I should have said this, I should have done this, I could have said that, I could have done that, or it goes like that, woulda, coulda, shoulda, like that, you know. And that's actually the inner voice, and that's actually helping you to create your own tulpa. So, but the predictive processing idea is right here, as we can see that. It goes from top down and then bottom up, that it goes in a circle. It's like a cycle. It's a really understandable way like this. So you guys can see that high level beliefs are becoming the concepts and expectations, and then it's becoming the sensory predictions, and then it's becoming the sensory input, and then that goes back to the same the prediction error, because it's not even happening, you know. So the psychology is actually explaining this way for the egregores and tulpas. Okay, So there is the, which I'm going to be talking about Dawkins in a little bit. I just started, so you guys will understand what this is. So some scholars also connect egregores to the idea of meme. What is the meme that we see on the internet nowadays? And this actually is popularized by Richard Dawkins. What Dawkins meant by a meme is a unique cultural transmission, an idea, symbol, behavior, or practice that spreads from person to person through imitation. For example, like the catchphrases, religious beliefs, melodies, fashion trends, internet jokes, and there's even like a lot of stuff that it goes all along. And from this angle, if you look at it, an egregore is similar to a powerful meme or narrative that shapes group behavior. So why scholars compare memes and egregores? An egregore is in occult and esoteric thought is often described as a collective thought form created and sustained by shared belief, growing stronger as more people focus on it. But scholars compare this to memes when they mean something like an idea spreads through a community with a meme and people believe in it, repeat it, and act on it. And this idea becomes very influential and persistent, and it can feel like it has a life of its own. So that actually creates the egregore right there. And that's actually how we are technically creating our own egregore during these modern days like that. And as we can see, the meme, Dawkins was actually thinking that it was the cultural idea that replicates, and egregore is the esoteric idea based on the collective thought form. So the meme spreads through imitation, but egregore grows through belief and ritual. Meme evolves over time, but egregore gains symbolic power. Meme exists in minds and culture, but egregore described as psychic or spiritual entity. So these are the differences about the meme and an egregore. But in a way, yes, it's an egregore if you would like to take it like that, of course. So we are going to be talking about this right here. The symbolic group identities are actually interesting. In institutions like nations, corporations, or religions can psychologically function like egregores because people collectively attribute agency or will to them, okay? And there is a natural stance in psychology. Most psychologists take a methodological neutral stance about this, and they study the experiences people report. They do not assume the entities exist independently of the mind. And they explain the phenomena through cognition, belief, imagination, and social interaction. So psychological interpretation as tulpa, a deliberately created mental agent or subpersonality produced by imagination, dissociation, and inner speech. Egregore is a metaphor for powerful shared beliefs or group identities shaping collective behavior. But yeah, exactly, like I have put it right here, why the brain is actually capable of creating experiences that feel like another independent mind. It is interesting though, isn't it? So the human brain is surprisingly good at generating the experience of another mind inside the same mind, as I was talking about the inner speech right here, inner voice. Psychologists and neuroscientists explain this through several mechanisms that normally help us understand other people. When those mechanisms are turned inward, they can produce the feeling of an independent mental agent. So the inner voice is actually coming active in this point, if that makes sense. The brain constantly simulates other minds. Humans evolved to predict what others are thinking or feeling right here. This ability is called theory of mind. Your brain routinely creates internal models of other people, imagining what your friend would say, anticipating a boss's reaction, mentally rehearsing conversations. So these models can become very detailed in the head, like we have talked about it also. If someone repeatedly imagines a character with personality, opinions, and voice, the brain can begin treating that simulation as a separate agent. Inner speech, which I have showed you guys just like it is on the screen right now, can split into multiple voices, as I have mentioned it earlier, okay? And that inner speech, or the internal monologue, refers to the covert act of speaking silently to oneself. So it can represent your own perspective, imagined perspectives of others, or conflicting viewpoints. Because the brain can generate dialogue, it can produce the feeling of two different speakers inside the mind. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I have 4 or 5 other selves that I'm speaking with all that when I go down to the inner speech. Whoa, then it means I have 4 or 5 different tulpas based on this idea. It's interesting, you know, that you guys can go like that. that's uh, different, really. So the brain's predictive system can make imagined things feel autonomous right here, as we have talked about it. According to predictive processing, the brain constantly predicts what experiences should occur and then compares predictions with sensory input. If the brain strongly predicts that a mental agent exists, for example, after extensive visualization or narrative building, the experience can start to feel self-generated yet not consciously controlled, which makes it seem autonomous. So the mind naturally contains multiple subsystems. Psychology increasingly recognizes that the mind is not a single unified entity. Models like internal family systems, that I actually just put it right here, describe, this is the book, by the way, so you guys can get it if you guys are interested in that. Describe the mind as a collection of parts or sub-personalities, like the inner critic, protector, inner child, child self, and as well, that it goes. So the internal family systems is a psychotherapy model developed in the early 1980s by family therapist Richard Schwartz. It views the human mind as an inner system of multiple subpersonalities or parts guided by a compassionate core self. So these parts can have different goals, argue internally, and produce different emotional reactions. So in some circumstances, those parts can become very personified, resembling a separate identity. And dissociation can increase the sense of separation. So that's another thing, that DID that I was mentioning, but now we are going we're diving deep into that subject as well. Dissociation is a psychological process involving a disruption in the normal integration of consciousness, memory, identity, perception, or emotion. It serves as a mental mechanism that separates aspects of experience, often as a response to trauma, extreme stress, or overwhelming emotion. A related mechanism is dissociation, where mental processes operate with less awareness of each other. At mild levels, which many people experience this, according to the research that I have figured out, dissociation can make internally generated thoughts feel as if they come from somewhere else in the mind. This is related but not identical to disorders like dissociative identity disorder, where the separation becomes extreme and disruptive. So the dissociative identity disorder is a complex psychiatric condition characterized by the presence of two or more distinct identity states or personality fragments within one individual. In a way, it's like a multiple personality disorder, but there's a huge difference, of course, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? There is a really huge difference like that. And it often develops as a coping mechanism in response to severe trauma, particularly in early childhood also, as I have mentioned it earlier. The brain is built to simulate minds, generate dialogue, and run multiple mental models simultaneously under certain conditions, especially with imagination, attention, and repetition. Those simulations can feel like an independent consciousness inside the mind. So the brain also, there's a really interesting information that I would like to share it with you guys. The same brain systems used for imagining other people are also involved in religion, fictional characters, and even feeling the presence of unseen beings. Also, this is why fictional characters sometimes feel psychologically alive to their creators and fans. It closely related to the same mechanisms according to um, psychology like this, okay? So now, if we're talking about the psychology, there is a particular name that I would like to mention as the part of psychology and the spirituality. This name is Carl Jung. According to Carl Jung's perspective, what's the egregore? So, the Carl Jung never directly used the term egregore in his psychological system. However, many scholars and Jungian analysts interpret egregores through several key Jungian ideas. From Jungian perspective, an egregore would likely be understood as a psychic structure emerging from the collective psyche rather than a literal independent supernatural being. One of the Jung's central theories is the collective unconscious. So there's a connection to the collective unconscious, okay? And this refers to a deep layer of the psyche shared by all humans that contains universal symbolic patterns called archetype. Like as in the spirituality that we talk about archetypes, and it is like coming from there also, this is a psychological version of it. So the archetype in Jungian analytical psychology, an archetype is a universal inherited pattern or image that shapes human perception, behavior, and imagination. Proposed by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung, archetypes are core structures within the collective unconscious shared by all humanity and expressed through myths, dreams, and art. So when we look at from this perspective, groups of people focusing on the same symbols, myths, or ideals can activate the same archetypal patterns. And these patterns begin influencing the group's thoughts, emotions, and behavior. A mystical tradition might interpret that influence as an egregore, while Jung would interpret it as archetypal forces operating collectively in the psyche. Psychological autonomous complexes are coming into the thing. So yeah, Carl Jung is actually my very, very favorite person, I would say. Not just as a from a psychological perspective, also spiritual aspects as well. So Carl Jung believed parts of the psyche can become semi-autonomous. He called these complexes related to the idea of the complex, which is psychology. Complexes can behave as if they have their own intentions, influence thoughts and emotions, and feel like an independent personality. When many people share the same emotionally charged symbols or beliefs, a collective complex could form. This is a very close idea to how occult traditions describe an egregore, as we have talked about it earlier. Projection onto symbolic entities are coming into the part of it. So the Carl Jung emphasized psychological projection, the tendency to project internal psychological forces outward. For example, a nation may be perceived as having a spirit, and a religious group may feel guided by a presence, and an organization may feel like it has a will. Carl Jung would likely say these are collective psychic energies projected onto symbols or institutions. Carl Jung also argued that gods, spirits, and mythic figures often represent psychological realities expressed symbolically. For instance, archetypal figures like Zeus, Odin can be understood psychologically as personifications of archetypal forces within the collective psyche. An egregore in Jungian language, Jungian psychology, might be interpreted as a modern symbolic form of a collective archetypal manifestation. So as I was talking about the manifestations earlier, what do you guys think about that? From a Jungian viewpoint, an egregore would likely be understood as a collective psychic complex energized by shared beliefs and emotion, structured by archetypal symbols, and experienced by groups as if it were an independent entity. But psychologically, it would still be a product of the collective psyche rather than a literal external being. So there's an interesting part that it is coming. Carl Jung sometimes described archetypes as having a kind of autonomy in the psyche, which is why experiences of gods, spirits, or presences can feel uncannily real. Some modern Jungian thinkers actually say that egregores are essentially archetypes temporarily organized around a specific group or movement. And so there is a question right away that it is coming following this. Why Carl Jung believed archetypes can behave almost like living entities in the mind. So Jung had an unusual and subtle view of the psyche. He believed archetypes can behave like autonomous agents inside the mind, as we have mentioned earlier. The interesting part is that Jung did not think archetypes were literally beings, but he also believed they were not fully under the control of the conscious ego. Because of this, they often feel like living entities. So archetypes are autonomous psychological systems. In Carl Jung's theory, the unconscious is not passive. It contains organized patterns called archetype within the collective unconscious. So these patterns generate images and emotions, influence behavior, appear in dreams and myths, and emerge without conscious control. Because they operate independently of the ego, Jung described them as autonomous. That autonomy makes them feel like another intelligence in psyche, okay? And the brain naturally personifies psychological forces. Humans instinctively represent psychological processes as characters. For example, archetypes often appear as figures such as the shadow, the anima, the wise old man. And if you guys are wondering about the wise old man, I actually have talked about that with the podcast that I have done about Merlin. And if you guys listen the second part of the Merlin, you guys will understand what I'm talking about, or the whole thing actually. And the first part of the Merlin that I was talking about how Merlin actually was born, and in the second part how actually Merlin was acting and guiding to King Arthur and others after that. So when these archetypes appear in dreams, visions, or imagination, they may speak, argue, give advices, or oppose the ego. This creates the powerful impression of interacting with another personality. Archetypes generate their own symbolic imagery. Carl Jung noticed that archetypal figures appear spontaneously across cultures in myths, religions, and dreams. For instance, the hero myth appears in figures like Heracles. The similar patterns appear in stories like Luke Skywalker. These recurring patterns suggested to Jung that archetypes are deep organizing structures of the psyche, not just invented ideas, because they produce imagery and narratives on their own. They can feel almost alive because of it. So Carl Jung treated archetypes as psychic realities, but this part is that, like, Carl Jung rejected both extremes of archetypes are literal supernatural beings and archetypes are just imaginary ideas. So instead of these, he proposed the middle position. So he is actually really political, very diplomatic approach that he is having in this, okay? Really. He said archetypes are objective psychological realities. That means they exist within the psyche. They influence people whether we believe in them or not, and they behave like independent forces. So Carl Jung once wrote that archetypes behave like living systems of reactions and aptitudes. So when someone experiences a powerful archetypal figure, such as a guiding spirit in a dream, Carl Jung would say it is not a literal spirit, but it is also not merely fictional. It is the psyche expressing an autonomous archetypal structure. So when we look at it, why this connects to egregores, because archetypes are shared across humanity, is the collective consciousness. And Carl Jung believed groups of people could activate the same archetypal pattern simultaneously. This is why religions, nations, and movements can behave as if they are guided by a collective spirit. From a Jungian perspective, what occult traditions can call an egregore may simply be an archetype activated and reinforced by a group mind. It's really interesting. So these archetypes feel like living entities because they arise from the unconscious, not the ego. They generate symbols and narratives on their own. They appear as personalities in dreams and imagination, and they influence behavior independently. So the wise old man, for example, wise old man archetype is always appearing often in dreams. And many report encounters with a wise guiding figure similar to wise old man archetype, even if they have never heard of Jung or anything about it. So when we look at it, if this wise old man archetype related to Merlin archetype, it is actually very close. Yes, it is very closely related to Merlin. So that's the reason why all these subjects are actually following each other. And I highly suggest you guys to watch the Merlin podcast that I have done earlier before. So the wise old man archetype in Jungian psychology is the figure that representing wisdom and insight, guidance during transformation, access to deeper knowledge of unconscious and moral or spiritual direction that is guiding us, okay? And this archetype often appears when the conscious mind is lost, uncertain, or entering a major life transition, according to Jung. So it's like a mentor or magical guide. But also Merlin, as a cultural expression of archetype, is appearing like the wizard Merlin from Arthurian legend is one of the most recognizable examples of the archetype. And actually, we still see in this day the Merlin archetype in the movies and everything, and nowadays. So this wise old man has spiritual knowledge, prophetic insight, magical abilities, and guiding the hero, which is King Arthur, toward destiny. He functions as the mentor who reveals hidden knowledge and prepares the hero for transformation. So the pattern appears in many cultures as like Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings, and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, Odin in Norse myth, And we see him as Dumbledore in Harry Potter movies. I'm actually trying to get done with the psychological part of this subject, so I'm almost done, and then after that I will be done with the subject for today. And next week actually I will start talking about the occult and esoteric traditions, how actually they perceive, and actually we are going to start seeing the parts of Freemasons and Illuminati, how they have their own egregores as well. So the wise old man emerges from the collective unconscious for, like, according to Jung, Carl Jung, actually Jungian psychology. Okay, this archetype is existing is because of that, emerges from the collective unconscious. Psychologically, it represents the emerge of deeper understanding, the voice of inner wisdom, and a connection to the self or higher self, according to some people also. Merlin, long story short, Merlin is not the archetype itself. He is a mythological embodiment of the wise old man archetype. And there's an interesting detail that it is coming with. Carl Jung also believed the wise old man can sometimes appear not as a person, but as a talking animal, mysterious stranger, or even a voice in dreams. The archetype adopts its form depending on what the psyche finds most meaningful. So, everyone, this is the mainly psychological part of egregores, and later next week we can talk about the occult part of the egregore, and we can actually talk about the secret society groups like Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Illuminati. Do they have their own egregores? And even more different perspectives of it, deeper perspectives of it as well. Let me see what else is coming after that. I cannot remember. I have put a lot of things in here, so yes. So I am actually going down deep into the rabbit hole of internet memes and all that stuff as well. Yes, I remember that. Yeah, it is going not just of the occult and esoteric, it is also going down into the internet perspective of the egregores, which we will be talking about it. It's very interesting as well. So, all right, you guys, for today, I guess we are done. I'm assuming, right? Yes. That's for the next week. We gotta be talking a lot more. I would like to see you guys' thoughts, opinions, ideas about this subject that we have been talking about it, because it's pretty interesting to me. Honestly, like in a way, it's like I said, mind fucking. And you may think that, shoot, is it really like psychological thing, or is it really spiritual or psychic or astral plane level thing? You know, it actually literally destroyed my mind when I was making the research about this subject. But I actually put all aspects of it so you guys actually can have your own opinions and make your own decision based on this subject. So that would be actually much better. That's the reason why I like doing these researches and I like talking about these subjects. So I would like to say thank you guys so much who was in here with me today, and whoever listened and whoever is listening afterwards. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And if you guys would like to get the live readings from me, I will be doing that on Thursday. And if you guys would like to check out that as well, you guys can go on my channel live section. You guys will see the link as well. You guys can turn the notifications on for getting your personal readings. Thank you guys so much for being in here and listening this subject. I would like to hear from you guys about what you guys are thinking. See you guys later. See you guys Thursday, and see you guys next Tuesday about this subject, the upcoming parts of it. Have a great day and have a great night wherever you guys are at. Love and lights.